It was a wedding day no one in Atlanta would ever forget. The flowers were perfect, the church was full, and the bride thought she was moments away from her happily ever after. But before the vows could be spoken, a dark family secret was exposed, and within minutes, gunshots rang out, leaving guests screaming in shock. This is the story of how love, betrayal, and hidden bloodlines turned a celebration into a tragedy. This is True Crimes Altar, where every sin is punished, every betrayal has a cost, and every soul must answer to the truth. Like, comment, and subscribe, because these are the stories the guilty prayed would stay buried. Gloria Lawson was just 22 years old when she had Alyssa. She raised her daughter alone, often telling people that Alyssa's father was a man who left them when she was still a baby. Gloria worked long hours as a nursing assistant, stretching every dollar to provide for her little girl. She was strict, proud, and determined to protect Alyssa from the kind of heartbreak she had endured. But Gloria was hiding something she thought she could take to her grave. When Gloria was young, she'd been involved with Charles Johnson, a married man who lived on the other side of town. Their affair was brief but intense. Charles was older, smooth, and carried himself like he owned the world. He promised Gloria a future he never planned to give her. When she found out she was pregnant, Charles told her to keep it quiet. He went back to his wife, leaving Gloria alone with a secret that would grow up in her house and one day try to marry his son. For years, Gloria carried that weight alone. She worked nights, came home exhausted, and still managed to cook, clean, and make sure Alyssa had everything she needed. People admired her strength. They called her resilient, a fighter, a mother who would sacrifice anything for her child. They didn't know that every time she looked into her daughter's face, she saw the man who had broken her heart and abandoned her. She didn't know whether to love Alyssa harder for being hers or resent her for being his. And so Gloria loved fiercely, but protected fiercely too. Too fiercely. Alyssa grew up believing her father was just a ghost from the past, some nameless man who had disappeared. She never questioned it. She was bright, ambitious, and full of life. By the time she was a teenager, she was popular in school, always smiling, always surrounded by friends. Boys liked her, girls wanted to be her friend, teachers praised her. Gloria kept a close watch on her, sometimes too close. Their relationship was tense at times, with Alyssa accusing her mother of being overprotective, controlling, and suffocating. Gloria wasn't just protecting her, though. She was protecting the truth. The truth that Alyssa's real father was still alive, still walking around the same city, still raising a family of his own, still pretending he hadn't left Gloria to fend for herself. And while Gloria fought to bury the past had other plans. Eric Johnson was the kind of man every parent dreamed of for their daughter. He was 27, worked as an IT specialist, and had a calm, steady presence that made Alyssa feel safe. They met at a friend's birthday party and hit it off instantly. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Eric treated her like a queen, and Alyssa fell hard. She introduced him to Gloria not long after they started dating. Gloria smiled, shook his hand, and made polite conversation, but inside, her stomach was in knots. She recognized his last name, his features, even the way he carried himself. He looked too much like Charles for her to ignore. But she said nothing. Instead, she prayed the relationship would fade like so many young romances do. But it didn't fade. It only grew stronger. Over the next 2 years, Eric and Alyssa built a love story that looked perfect from the outside. They took trips together, posted smiling photos on social media, and talked about their future constantly. They shared plans for children, a house, a life. Eric was dependable, responsible, and loving. He showed up for Alyssa in ways she had always dreamed someone would. When Eric proposed to Alyssa during a romantic dinner downtown, she said yes through tears, clutching the ring like it was a dream come true. Gloria forced herself to clap and hug them, hiding the dread that churned inside her. She had hoped this day would never come. Charles Johnson, Eric's father, was a respected man in the community. He owned a small construction business and was known for his confidence and charisma. He was the kind of man people called when they needed something done right. He attended church, donated to fundraisers, and kept up appearances. But when Eric brought Alyssa home for dinner one evening, Charles froze. He knew her. He had known her since before she was born. One look at Alyssa and the past slammed back into him like a freight train. He saw Gloria in her eyes, in her smile, and he realized the unthinkable might be true. At first, Charles kept quiet. He told himself he was imagining things. Maybe Alyssa just resembled Gloria because of the small neighborhood they'd once shared. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. But the more he saw Alyssa with his son, the harder it was to ignore. He remembered the nights with Gloria, the whispered promises, the way she had cried when he walked away. He remembered her pleading for him to stay when she found out she was pregnant. And now, here was Alyssa, sitting at his table, laughing with his wife, holding his son's hand. The guilt was suffocating. Charles tried to dismiss it, but when the wedding date was set, the weight became unbearable. He couldn't sleep, he couldn't focus, and every time he saw Eric with Alyssa, he felt like the walls were closing in. He began looking for proof, quietly, without telling anyone. He searched through old records, checked dates, and did the math over and over in his head. The timelines lined up too neatly. Alyssa's birth year, Gloria's pregnancy, the months he'd been seeing her. He knew it in his gut, but he needed more than gut feelings. He needed evidence. That's when he ordered the DNA test in secret. He told himself it was just to clear his conscience, that he needed to know for sure before he said anything. But deep down, he feared the answer. When the envelope arrived with the results, Charles felt his hand shaking so badly he could barely open it. He sat alone in his truck, the paper trembling between his fingers. The words on the page confirmed his darkest fear. Alyssa Lawson wasn't just his son's fiancée. She was his daughter. And now he faced the unthinkable truth. Eric was about to marry his half-sister. Charles's heart pounded in his chest as sweat gathered at his temples. He thought about ripping the paper to shreds, about burning it, about pretending he had never seen it. But he couldn't unknow the truth. Every time he looked at Alyssa, every time he heard Eric talk about their wedding, the guilt ate away at him like acid. He had hidden one secret for decades, and it had destroyed one woman's life. Now that secret was about to destroy another. Charles Johnson stared at the DNA results for hours that night, pacing in circles like a man trapped in his own skin. His wife was asleep in the next room, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside her home. Eric's laughter echoed in his mind. Alyssa's smile flashed before his eyes, and the paper in his hands felt heavier than stone. He tried to think of a way out, some solution that wouldn't ruin everyone's life. But there was no way to unring this bell. The test said what his heart already knew. Alyssa was his blood. She was his mistake. His daughter and his son was about to marry her. Charles thought of calling Gloria, demanding answers, demanding to know why she had let things go this far. But every time he picked up the phone, he froze. What could he say? What could she say? She had kept his secret for over 20 years. She had done exactly what he asked her to do when he walked away. She had stayed silent, but silence had grown into something darker, and now that silence was about to explode in front of an entire church, Charles didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table all night, staring at the wall, whispering prayers under his breath. In the morning, he looked at his wife, a good woman who had stood by him through decades of marriage, and he wondered if she had ever suspected. He wondered what she would do when she learned the truth, that her husband had betrayed her years ago, that the young woman she had welcomed into her home was the living proof of his infidelity. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. He didn't know how. Eric, meanwhile, was oblivious. He was busy planning his wedding, smiling at tuxedo fittings, picking songs for the reception, and talking about honeymoons. He loved Alyssa with a sincerity that made Charles's stomach twist. Alyssa glowed every time she looked at him, never doubting for a moment that the man she was marrying was her future, not her blood. Gloria carried her own storm. The closer the wedding came, the more she felt the walls pressing in. She had tried for years to convince herself the truth would never matter. Alyssa didn't need to know who her father was. The past was buried, and she had done her job as a mother. But watching Eric's family mingle with hers, seeing Charles across the table, seeing the way his eyes lingered on Alyssa, she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. The secret was alive again, and it was suffocating. On the night of the rehearsal dinner, Gloria stood in front of her mirror for an hour, staring at herself. She barely recognized the woman in the reflection. She looked older, worn down, haunted. She thought of all the times Alyssa had asked about her father. She thought of the lies she had told. He was gone. He didn't care. He wasn't important. She thought of the day Charles had left, the way his back had looked as he walked away, the way she had begged him to stay. She had hated him for years, and yet here she was, still protecting him, still hiding his sin. And now it was about to destroy them all. The day before the wedding, Charles couldn't take it anymore. He called Eric and asked to meet him at the church early on the morning of the ceremony. He told himself he would wait until after the vows, maybe after the honeymoon, maybe never. But when he heard his son's voice on the phone, so happy, so certain, he knew he couldn't stay quiet. He had to stop this. The wedding morning was clear and bright. Guests dressed in their best outfits filed into the church, laughing, hugging, taking photos. Flowers lined the aisles, the choir rehearsed softly in the background, and the atmosphere was electric with joy. But behind that joy was a father with a secret heavy enough to crush everyone in the room. Charles pulled Eric aside just before the music began. His face was pale, his hands trembled, and his voice cracked as he told his son they needed to talk. Eric thought it was nerves, maybe advice, maybe a father's blessing. But when Charles pulled a folded envelope from his jacket and pressed it into his hand, Eric felt his stomach sink. Charles' voice was low, broken. "Read it," he said. Eric opened the envelope. His eyes moved across the words. Confusion first, then disbelief, then horror. His breathing quickened, his face drained of color, and he staggered back against the wall. "What is this?" he whispered. "Tell me this isn't real." Charles could barely look at him. "It's real. Son, she's not just your bride. She's your sister. Alyssa is my daughter." The words hung in the air like poison. Eric's world collapsed in a single heartbeat. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his love, his future, it was all shattered. He shook his head violently, refusing to believe it, but the paper in his hands and the look in his father's eyes told him there was no escape. He had fallen in love with his sister. He was about to marry her, and everyone was already waiting at the altar. Eric's chest tightened as the church bells rang outside, signaling it was time for the ceremony to begin. He stared at his father in disbelief, clutching the DNA results in his hands, his mind spinning so fast he could barely stand. His knees buckled and he pressed a hand against the wall for balance. The laughter of guests filtered in from the sanctuary, muffled but steady, like a cruel reminder of the life he thought he was about to have. "This can't be true," Eric muttered, shaking his head. "This can't be real." Charles reached for him, his voice low and trembling. "I'm sorry, son. I should have stopped this sooner. I should have told you before it ever got this far." Eric pulled away, rage and heartbreak colliding in his chest. You knew, and you let me fall in love with her. You let me ask her to marry me." Charles's face crumpled with guilt, but he didn't argue. The truth was undeniable. Eric's eyes darted to the door leading into the sanctuary where Alyssa was waiting, radiant in her gown, completely unaware of the storm about to break. His stomach twisted as bile rose in his throat. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He couldn't imagine looking at her, touching her, kissing her, knowing she was his blood. Charles placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have to stop it now, before it goes any further." Eric shook him off. "You don't get to decide anything anymore. You ruined this. You ruined me." He stormed away, clutching the paper like it was burning his skin. In the dressing room across the hall, Alyssa stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her veil. Bridesmaids bustled around her, whispering about how stunning she looked. Gloria sat in a chair against the wall, her face tense, her hands clenched in her lap. She couldn't stop staring at her daughter. Alyssa was glowing, smiling, full of hope, and Gloria knew in her heart that smile wouldn't last. The secret was too heavy. The walls were closing in. Alyssa turned to her mother, her eyes soft. "You okay, Mama? You've been quiet all morning." Gloria forced a smile. I'm fine, baby. Just emotional. Watching you walk down that aisle, it's everything I ever wanted for you. But her voice cracked, betraying her fear. Before Alyssa could press her, the door opened. Eric stood there, pale, his hands shaking, his eyes wild. The room fell silent. Alyssa's smile faded instantly. Eric? What's wrong? He stepped inside, ignoring the curious stares of the bridesmaids. His gaze locked on Gloria. His voice was sharp, broken, trembling with rage. How could you do this? Gloria froze. Her worst fear had come true. Eric, not here, she whispered, her voice desperate. But Eric wasn't listening. He pulled the folded paper from his jacket and tossed it onto the vanity in front of Alyssa. Read it. Go ahead. Tell me it's a lie. Alyssa frowned, confused, her hands trembling as she picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the words, her breath catching as the truth sank in. She looked up at her mother, her voice barely a whisper. Mom, what is this? Gloria's throat tightened. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for her daughter. Alyssa, please. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to protect us. Alyssa backed away, the paper falling from her hands. Protect me? You let me fall in love with my brother. You let me plan a wedding with my brother. The bridesmaids gasped, hands covering their mouths. The room was spinning out of control. Eric's fists clenched, his body trembling with fury. He pointed at Gloria, his voice breaking. You knew this whole time. You could have stopped it years ago, but you didn't. You just let it happen. Gloria stood, her hands raised as though she could calm the chaos with a gesture. I was young. I was scared. I made mistakes, but I never meant for this. Never meant for this? Eric cut her off, his voice rising. This is your fault. All of it. My life. Her life. You ruined everything. Alyssa sobbed, her wedding dress shaking as she collapsed onto a chair. The room erupted into whispers, bridesmaids frantically exchanging glances, unsure whether to leave or stay. Outside, the organist began to play, signaling the start of the ceremony. Guests turned in their seats, waiting for the doors to open. But behind those doors, a family secret had exploded, and in its ashes, love had turned to rage. Gloria's face hardened. Something inside her snapped as she looked at her daughter crumpled in white lace and the man who was both her lover and her blood. She saw the judgment in Eric's eyes, the betrayal in Alyssa's tears, and she felt the walls closing in. She had hidden this secret for decades, sacrificed everything to keep it buried. And now it was out in the open, tearing her life apart in front of everyone. In her purse, hidden beneath tissues and makeup, was the gun she had brought with her. She had told herself it was for protection, for safety, because weddings drew crowds and crowds could be dangerous. But in that moment, with her world crashing down and the people she loved turning against her, the gun became something else entirely. A way to silence the shame. A way to make the pain stop. A way to end it all. Eric's words were still echoing off the walls when Gloria's hand drifted to her purse. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. All her life she had been fighting to protect Alyssa, to keep a roof over her head, to shield her from the ugliness of the world, and yet here she was being accused, condemned, treated like a monster by the two people she loved most. Alyssa was still sobbing, makeup streaking down her face, her veil crumpled in her lap. Eric's jaw was tight, his fists balled at his sides, his eyes like knives. The bridesmaids whispered frantically, some of them backing toward the door. Gloria felt the weight of every year she had carried her secret, and something inside her broke. She stood slowly, her movements calm and deliberate, her voice low but shaking. You don't understand. I gave up everything for you, she said, looking at Alyssa. I lost everything to raise you. I did what I had to do. Alyssa looked up at her, her eyes red and swollen. What you had to do? You let me fall in love with my brother? You watched me plan a wedding with him. How could you do that?" Gloria's breath came fast. "Because if I told the truth, you would have hated me. You would have hated yourself. You would have hated him. I thought I could stop it. I thought I would never go this far." Eric stepped closer, his voice hard and cold. "You thought wrong." The words landed like a slap. Gloria's fingers brushed the inside of her purse. She could feel the smooth handle of the gun, the cool metal under her palm. She hadn't even realized she was gripping it until her thumb found the safety. Her mind raced. If she walked out of the room now, everything was over. Her life, her reputation, her daughter. She would lose Alyssa forever, lose everything she had fought to keep. The organ music outside grew louder, a rising swell, as if mocking the chaos unfolding behind the door. And the sanctuary guests were beginning to murmur, wondering what was causing the delay. The pastor glanced at his watch, then at the double doors at the back of the church, his smile faltering. He had no idea that behind those doors, lives were unraveling. In the dressing room, Eric turned to Alyssa, his voice softening. "We can still stop this. We don't have to go through with it. We can walk away now." Alyssa looked at him, her face crumpling. "Walk away? How do we walk away from this? From what we've done? From what she's done?" Her eyes darted to her mother, her expression twisting from grief to anger. "You disgust me," she whispered. That was the moment Gloria snapped. Her hand tightened around the gun and she drew it from her purse with a smooth, practiced motion. The bridesmaids screamed, some ducking, some bolting for the door. Eric's eyes went wide. "Mom, what are you doing?" Alyssa cried, backing up until her dress brushed the vanity. Gloria's hand shook, but her voice came out steady, eerily calm. "I gave you everything. I gave you my life. And this is how you repay me? By spitting in my face? By judging me?" Eric stepped forward, his hands raised. "Put the gun down, Gloria. We can fix this. We can talk." Gloria's lip trembled. "Talk? After everything I've done? After everything I've lost? You want to talk?" Her finger hovered near the trigger. Outside the door, the organ stopped abruptly. Guests shifted in their seats. Someone whispered, "What's going on back there?" But no one knew. In the dressing room, time seemed to slow. Eric moved closer, one step at a time, speaking softly. "Give me the gun. Please. You're not thinking straight." Gloria's eyes darted from Eric to Alyssa, her face a mask of pain and fury. "I loved you both. I gave you everything. And you destroyed me." Alyssa was sobbing now, shaking her head. "Please, Mama, don't do this. Please." Gloria's voice cracked. "You were supposed to be my redemption. You were supposed to be my future. But you're just my punishment." And then, with a sound like the world shattering, the first shot rang out. The blast of the gunshot tore through the room, deafening, final, impossible to mistake. Alyssa screamed as the bullet ripped into Eric's chest, his body jerking backward before he crashed against the vanity. The bridesmaids shrieked and bolted, the door slamming open as they spilled into the hallway, their high heels clattering against the church floor. Guests in the sanctuary gasped, heads turning toward the commotion, the pastor frozen in shock as the music came to an abrupt halt. Inside the dressing room, Eric groaned, clutching his chest, his shirt blooming red. He fell to his knees, eyes wide in disbelief, as Alyssa stumbled forward. "Eric, no. Oh my God, no," she cried, grabbing his arm, trying to hold him up as blood poured between her fingers. Gloria's hand shook violently, the gun still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. Her eyes were wild, filled with tears, but also something darker, something that looked like relief. Alyssa turned on her, her voice breaking. "What have you done? What have you done?" Gloria's face twisted. "He was going to ruin everything. He was going to take you away from me." Eric's breathing came shallow, ragged. He tried to speak, his lips forming words, but only blood came out. Alyssa screamed for help, her voice echoing down the hall. The first guests were already rushing toward the dressing room, their faces pale with fear. Gloria tightened her grip on the gun, her finger twitching on the trigger again. "Don't scream at me," she hissed. "Don't you dare scream at me after everything I've done for you." Alyssa shook her head violently, her white dress now stained with Eric's blood. "You're a monster. You killed him. You killed the man I love." Gloria's jaw clenched, her tears spilling. "The man you love? He's your brother. Don't you see? I saved you. I saved you from a sin you can't come back from." Alyssa's voice rose into a scream, filled with hatred. "No, Mama, you didn't save me. You destroyed me. You destroyed me. You destroyed everything." Gloria's hand trembled, her breathing uneven. In the hallway, voices grew louder, footsteps pounding closer. Someone shouted, "Call 911! Call the police!" The chaos outside was closing in, but Gloria couldn't hear any of it anymore. All she could hear was her daughter's voice, sharp and condemning, ripping through her chest like another bullet. "I wish you were dead," Alyssa spat, her face streaked with tears. And that was it. Something inside Gloria shattered completely. With a sob, she raised the gun again, her eyes locked on the daughter she had carried, the daughter she had sacrificed for, the daughter she thought would be her salvation. Alyssa's eyes widened, her lips parting in terror. "Mama, please." The second shot cracked through the air, louder than the first, echoing off the walls. Alyssa's body jerked, the lace of her gown blooming crimson as she collapsed beside Eric, her hands twitching, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The screams outside rose to a fever pitch as people rushed toward the door, some trying to force their way inside, others running for safety. Gloria stood over the bodies of her daughter and the man who was both her lover and her son, the gun still smoking in her hand, her chest heaving. She looked down at them, at the horror she had unleashed, at the blood pooling across the white fabric of Alyssa's dress and the floor beneath them. The door burst open and a crowd of horrified faces appeared. Guests, family members, even the pastor. Gasps filled the room, women shrieking, men yelling. Someone shouted, "She shot them. She shot them both." Gloria's arm dropped to her side, the gun still dangling from her hand. For the first time in decades, the secret was gone. Exposed, destroyed, carved into flesh and blood. She stood there trembling, her face wet with tears, surrounded by the chaos of her sins, and whispered, "I just wanted to protect you." The church erupted into chaos as people pushed past one another, trying to escape the gunfire. Children cried, women screamed, men shouted in disbelief. The choir huddled together, their voices drowned out by the panic. In the dressing room, Eric and Alyssa lay side by side, their blood seeping into the same floorboards where they had been preparing for a lifetime together. Gloria stood over them, trembling, the gun still in her hand, her eyes glazed with shock. It only took minutes for the police to arrive, sirens wailing outside the church as officers rushed in. They found Gloria frozen in place, staring down at her daughter's lifeless body. When the officers ordered her to drop the weapon, she didn't move at first. One shouted louder, his voice sharp and commanding, and finally her hand opened, the gun clattering to the ground. She whispered, "I just wanted to protect her," as they cuffed her and led her past a sea of horrified faces. The guests parted in silence, some sobbing, others glaring, all of them carrying the memory of what they had just witnessed. Outside, the wedding flowers wilted under the sun, stained by footprints of fleeing guests, the once joyful day now forever cursed. At the station, Gloria confessed. She told detectives about her affair with Charles, about the years of silence, about how she thought she could bury the truth forever. She said she brought the gun for protection, never planning to use it, but admitted she snapped when Alyssa turned against her. Her words were hollow, her voice flat, as if even she didn't believe her own explanation. The district attorney wasted no time. Gloria was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. At her trial, the courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the benches, cameras crowded the courthouse steps. The prosecution painted her as a selfish woman who murdered to escape shame, while her defense claimed years of guilt and fear had broken her mind. Witnesses testified, bridesmaids who saw the confrontation, guests who heard the screams, even Charles, who admitted under oath that Alyssa was his daughter. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge's voice was stern as he sentenced Gloria to life in prison without parole, telling her she had not only taken 2 lives but destroyed an entire community in the process. In prison, Gloria spends her days quietly, never receiving visitors, never speaking of what she did. Charles's marriage collapsed under the weight of his exposed secret. His business suffered, his reputation shattered. Eric's family mourned the son they lost twice, once to betrayal and once to murder. Alyssa was buried in her wedding dress, a bitter symbol of the day that should have been her beginning, but became her end. The story of Gloria Lawson is a reminder that secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, that lies we think are buried will one day demand a price. Love built on deception is never love at all, and betrayal doesn't just wound, it destroys. What started as a celebration ended as a crime scene, and the echoes of that day still haunt everyone who was there. What do you think about this case? Could it have been prevented if the truth had been told sooner? Or was tragedy inevitable the moment the secret was born? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to True Crimes Alter for more stories that will keep you questioning the people closest to you. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.